I'm interjecting. How am I doing there? Okay. I'm going to interject here, insert into previous part about this idea of me sort of berating the conservative and Christian community, my community, for not getting off their asses and fighting. While I hold to that, I feel like I need to cushion it some, because it hasn't been said. It's not out there in the world, not in Europe, in the United States, in the churches, anywhere. We've all been sitting here watching this approaching, and now encroaching, I guess, evil come upon America and the globe for 30, 40 years. Some people before I was born, you know, they would say from the 20s that it was coming along, but I don't know, it just seems like it's been arriving at a rocket pace since the 70s, and really going head-to-head against Christianity, the biblical values, Judeo-Christian moral ethic. We've all been watching it and seeing the destruction. And then we gather and we talk about it. Those that know better talk about the Democrats, and they talk about the evil, and talk about the liberals in Hollywood. What hasn't been said before, and why I want to walk a little bit gently on it, because any new concept, especially receiving criticism, should be generally presented in a calm, kind fashion to people who care. They do care in the Christian community, the conservative community. They just haven't been, we haven't been taught yet about our role in it. What I think has been going on, look at how dark that is. This is water, by the way. I don't want people to think I'm just like sweating crazily here. This is water here, and I splash like this to take advantage of the latent heat of evaporation. Look it up. So since we haven't been hit with it, you've got to present the case to people, I believe. Now that as I think about it a little, I also believe that sometimes, you know, it helps to sting people. Doesn't it? Sting people a little so that they'll pay closer attention. So thus, you know, get off your asses. Here's the deal. We all know there's the war for the culture, for truth, for freedom, for the money that they steal from taxpayers every day. More than just what comes out of your paycheck. Also, everything you buy has been taxed before it got there. So the people who sold it, who manufactured it, they all paid taxes. So you're paying higher prices, therefore you're paying an indirect tax every time you buy something. And you buy a lot of stuff. We do. They have been stealing from us, invading the country with 100 million immigrants over the last 40 years, since I left high school, a little before I left high school. Lying to our children in schools about evolution, which is scientifically impossible, according to science. First law of thermodynamics, second law of thermodynamics, law of biogenesis, law of information, laws of statistical probability, the changing magnetic field, the fact that the moon is moving further away from the earth, the amount of sediment at the end of the Mississippi Delta. There are many, many, many proofs that evolution is a pile of crap. It just is. It's well, some of them are proofs, like the sediments, the magnetic field. and the shifting of the moon, the amount of dust on the moon, things like that. And then some of them are scientific impossibilities. Impossible, according to science, for there to have been a Big Bang, which is one leg of the three-legged bar stool of evolution. The second one being spontaneous generation of life, and then the final one, of course, being what we refer to as evolution. Lying to children in schools about that, about global warming, about the science of sexuality, the psychology of sexuality, if you will, about the history of slavery, blaming Whitey, not saying that black people were selling slaves too, and that black people even owned slaves here in America, hushing up 50 years at least worth of black racism in the United States of America, including violence from black racism, lots of it. Hushing it up, all of that being fed to children. So that's the people we're up against. Therefore, it's war. What they're doing is war. They're stealing, they're lying to children, they're lying to adults, they're allowing an invasion of the country, they're ripping into decent men and women who run for office, and some who don't even run for office, like Laura Schlesinger had a radio show, and they got her butt fired because she said a word. You know, it's just like there's illegal words to say in America. Only some people can say them. But we're not at war with them. You see, we've been waiting for Rush Limbaugh, I guess. I mean, I think that it's sort of natural. Rush Limbaugh came out of seemingly nowhere 28 years ago and took on the fight. He was our general, and he's smart, he's interesting, well-informed, engaging, and can be rather funny. And people were tuning in droves, so that it was fairly natural to contemplate the idea that that would work to educate the masses, the voters, so that the country might be rescued from these hateful, demonic Democrats.
We're going to tax them out of business.
Instead of worrying about whether immigrants can learn English, you need to make sure your child can speak Spanish.
One thing that I think is clear with young people and with adults as well is that we just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on a Monday and then only do it every Monday. We need to do this every day of the week.
As far as I'm concerned, the Tea Party can go straight to hell.
I've made it very clear to make sure that the protesters were able to exercise their right to free speech. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well.
I am sick and tired of people who say that if you debate and you disagree with this administration, somehow you're not patriotic, and we should stand up and say we are Americans and we have a right to debate and disagree with any administration.
The Girl Scouts has had some ties to Planned Parenthood. Do you think that's a valuable relationship?
Yes, I think they're all very valuable.
When you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody. Spread the wealth around, spread the wealth around, spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody.
And that was easily ascertained that was not the fact.
But
and the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
We're going to tax them out of business.
And just really brainwash people into
so that the country might be rescued from these hateful, demonic Democrats. And now we're seeing the liberal phonies who call themselves Republicans and go along with them. And of course, the fountain of it all, which is where I go back to, I don't even think it's worth picking on the Democrats, because I believe the Democrats are chosen by the atheist elite who spread all of the teaching and decide who gets fired and who gets hired, who gets praised, who's adored, by way of their television networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, both entertainment and news, also NPR on the radio version, and then other things. It made sense to think that Limbaugh would get it done. And then along came others, right? Sean Hannity, I don't know how long he's been around, but it's been quite a while, and Hugh Hewitt, who's fairly liberal for my blood, but he's definitely not a deceitful liberal, and he would call himself a conservative. Michael Medved, who's also kind of liberal, but not of the mainstream liberal variety. Laura Ingraham, Glenn Beck, fabulous fighter. But we've got to figure it out by now. You've got to figure it out by now. Even I figured it out back in the time when Clinton was reelected in 1996, and the polling numbers that were against Republicans during the impeachment battle, which I'm not going to go into, but face it, suffice it to say that the press and the Democrats framed Republicans. The Republicans, I guess, allowed themselves to be framed and defined in that way. It was not Republicans going after somebody for sex. It was perjury, but unfortunately with Ken Starr, they didn't take on all of the massive constitutional violations that Clinton was engaging in. Other things, selling defense technology to China, for one. And then the conquest of when Clinton bombed the Christian people of Serbia to help a Muslim terrorist group take away the province of Kosovo from them. Bill Clinton went to war claiming that there was genocide going on. Later in trial, it turned out there was no genocide. Nobody across this planet ever heard anybody at the network news level demand proof justifying Bill Clinton's invasion. Remember GW? No, where are the WMDs? Where's the proof? Why did he go to this war? Well, why did Bill Clinton go to war? And more importantly, why did nobody in America ever hear the question asked? Anyway, back in '96, when he got reelected, but the polling leading up to that, showing how many people favored Bill Clinton in that battle, I knew we were in a lot of trouble right then. Then we got a liberal George Bush for 8 years, followed by, well, Bush almost lost to the garbage liar Al Gore, caught. Illegal campaign donations and other things working out of the White House, caught. Couldn't get the press to report it, but if American people who were paying attention, they were told about it by talk radio and by Fox News. So he barely won that election. Won in 04, and then in 08 we get Obama, and then Obama's reelected in 12. We're in massive trouble. Obviously, Rush Limbaugh, Fox News, and others are not getting the job done. It's time to realize that, right? It's time to wake up and say, okay, so nobody's taught me that yet, but now I'm hearing it, and maybe I had ideas on my own about it. I've enrolled my children in these deceit factories, where they teach the religion of atheist humanism, the religion/moral framework of atheist humanism, deceitfully, deceitful science, deceitful psychology. It's time to say, you know, what am I doing putting my kids here? It's time to say, how much is enough? How much will I let them steal our country? The invasion with the immigrants, the theft, direct theft through taxes, the pollution through constant soft pornography on television. No control over it anymore. The people of Arizona, the people of California voting to stop Democrats from stealing their money and giving it to illegal immigrants. And the Supreme Court justices appointed by corrupt presidents overruling the will of the people. There's supposed to be a 10th Amendment where the states have the right to make decisions on their own, but we've gone so far in the direction of corruption that the Supreme Court just scoffs at the very idea. Of course, so do Democrats and their leaders in the press. It's time to wake up and realize that. I know a lot of people, you hear it for years, you know, well, when they come for my guns, we're going to shoot it out in my yard. But the amazing strange phenomenon is that through propaganda and the psychology, some Freudian, some other stuff learned through CIA tactics, through the Soviet Union, they figured out how to get the people to become passive, to make them happy and content so they wouldn't revolt.
When the Soviets used the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
The main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. Only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process, which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. The process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded and common sense people who would be acting in favor and in the interests of the United States society.
While happy and content and not revolting, the country was taken over and conquered, and they let you keep your guns. See, so they're not coming for your guns. I mean, theoretically they might, but the only thing you'll have left is the guns. They've already got the minds of your children, if not yours, your neighbors, or your grandchildren. They've got your country through, they've already destroyed the culture. They have destroyed it, bringing in 100 million immigrants, partially there, partially through the entertainment industry and the fake news, and turning a subsect of the population, the black community, against whites by distorting the history of slavery, by distorting current events. As every time they turn up rocks, and if they can try and find some white racist, they play it nationwide for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. In the meantime, during that week, 2 weeks, and 3 weeks, there's always one or at least a few times a year of violent, hateful, racist attacks by blacks on whites that are thoroughly ignored.
They are all black, and police say race motivated their brazen and random attacks on complete strangers. This group of 32 people targeted only certain people to allegedly beat up and rob.
The primary focus was on white males.
A large group of young black people were involved in assaults in or around the fairgrounds.
Juveniles were attempting to assault white citizens.
2 officers were hit in the head from behind while trying to make arrests.
What I was told from some officers that it was like a swarm of bees.
This was the 3rd time large groups of young black people were seen assaulting people in and around the fair. The first being at the end of the fair's East Sider night, and the second was on Friday. Police say that on Friday a white man was severely assaulted by a group of black males and females, eventually fracturing his skull, an attack the police think may have been race-related.
In the police report it states that a group of black males and females were out at the fair yelling out that it's Beat Whitey night.
It came out of nowhere. A man goes on a rampage in Union Square, violently attacking a complete stranger. The victim now declared brain dead. Tonight, police say it could be a hate crime.
Alice, this bizarre, brutal attack, broad daylight, Union Square.
And he said, the next white person that walks by, I'm going to... And before he could finish, his fist went in and the man's head bobbed and he hit the ground and you could hear his skull hitting the ground.
He stood back there and hit 2 more people.
Babbitt is at Bellevue Hospital Center where family friends say he is in a coma, declared brain dead. At the hospital with him, his 92-year-old mother, Hedda. The two shared this Sheepshead Bay apartment and the son was his mother's primary caregiver.
And that local rally for Trayvon Martin is hitting home with a local mom who says her son was a victim of a terrible crime as well.
The story of a 13-year-old Kansas City boy walking home from East High School, being followed by 2 boys and allegedly set on fire on his own front porch, made a lot of parents cringe. And with no new developments in the case, it's faded from the spotlight. We talked with the alleged victim's mother on the phone.
It's just very frustrating because I feel like we're being brushed off and there's nothing that's happening for us. It's a horrible tragedy and my heart definitely goes out to Trayvon and their family and I hope they get the answers, everything they want, but we do too here in Kansas City want all the answers we need to help us here.
Now, it's important to note police never did nor do they today consider this a racially charged crime. They are, however, still asking anyone with information to call them on the TIPS hotline. That number, 816-474-TIPS. Reporting in downtown Kansas City, Missouri, Amy Anderson, KCTV5 News.
Let me just add a point of clarification here. The process of how this works in relation to these clips is a teeny bit intricate. Requires, for some, for many I would imagine, a bit of background. What you're seeing here, there, and there, and there, every one of these, it's a very important distinction to keep in mind. If you don't come away from it with anything else, remember this part. Every one of these represents a local television station. Not one time in my life that I recall, and I've searched and haven't been able to find any either now that we're in the age of the online search, have I ever seen a story of even nonviolent, much more violent black racism reported at the national level. Okay, that's a highly important distinction. Katie Couric, Dan Rather, Tom Brokaw, Scott Pelley, Robin Roberts, Walter Cronkite, if you want to go back that far, Matt Lauer, Brian Gumbel, Diane Sawyer, all of those people work for the national network out of New York.
Nightly News begins now. From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
From ABC News World Headquarters, this is ABC World News with Diane Sawyer. Reporting tonight, David Muir.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley. Good evening. They are the biggest clues yet.
Good morning, America. Breaking right now, flooding emergency. Torrential rain falling at 3 inches an hour in Texas.
And GMA, here I come.
Are you ready for this? Love and look at those moves. This morning, the park is J-Lo Central, and you've got a front row seat.
I'm here live this morning only on GMA.
From ABC News, live in Times
Square. In Atlanta, former President Carter spoke up and spoke out against what he has seen emerging in some of the public protests against President Obama. During the interview, we talked about what some see as a heightened climate of racial and other hate speech since the election of President Obama.
The NAACP has just adopted a resolution this evening at its annual convention condemning, quote, racist behavior by Tea Party members.
Good morning. Personal foul. Los Angeles Clippers owner Donald Sterling files a $1 billion lawsuit against the NBA, claiming he was wrongly banned from the league after his racially charged rant went public.
From NBC News, this is Today with Lester Holt and Erica Hill, live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
They are not working, maybe some of them used to, but they do not work for local TV stations. The reason why when you go from city to city and you still see those same faces is because from New York they beam into every television station, well, every affiliate television station in the country. They reach 500 largest cities in the country, so that if something is reported at a television station and maybe 10, 15, 30,000 people hear about it, we have 300 and some million in the country. The whole nation never finds out unless it gets beamed out of New York. For years, for my entire lifetime, the only racism stories that ever get beamed out of New York are stories of white racism. Got that? Never. None of these. None before them. None since then has been beamed out of New York. Not one story ever of black racism reaches the entire country at the same time. On top of that, when you have a James Byrd, a Trayvon Martin, a Michael Brown, whatever it is, it doesn't just reach the whole nation, it sometimes reaches it for 3 weeks in a row. And also, ABC and CBS have contracts with radio stations across the nation where they beam in a 3 or 4 minute hourly update to those radio stations.
I'm Steve Kathan. Protesters are back in the streets of Ferguson, Missouri.
CBS News, Washington. Another top official in Ferguson, Missouri is out. Mayor James Knowles made the announcement.
The city of Ferguson and Police Chief Thomas Jackson have agreed to a mutual separation, which involves the police chief's resignation from the city of Ferguson.
So you can also, while driving, and other people hear 24 times a day the main thrust of what these folks in New York are trying to teach that day, that week. So let's say that they're really out to make some point, like to prevent a conservative from getting elected president, Pat Buchanan, Herman Cain. It will go lead story on ABC, NBC, and CBS, also NPR and radio. The three of those right there are 50 million people, 4 of those with radio, 50 million people. Add in the hourly updates 24 times a day. I don't know how to calculate that number, but it certainly increases. When they're trying to drive something home, like Herman Cain's a womanizer, not that Democrats or liberals should care after what they gave us with Clinton, right? But or that Pat Buchanan is a racist and he believes that Hitler, is the good guy, which is total bullcrap. But there's nobody there contesting them when they say it, and a lot of people on this planet are willing to believe what they're told by those convincing personalities on TV and radio. When they're trying to drive a point home, they hit all 3 of the stations, plus the radio, plus the New York Times, the Washington Post, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Seattle Times, and the Portland Oregonian, and the Chicago Tribune, and Boston Globe, and USA Today, all of them acting in unison until his own people start turning against him. Therefore, what you end up with on the Republican side is another liberal Republican phony. Or the media favorite, of course, is the neo-communist, thieving, control freak liars in the Democratic Party. Which is their preference, but if they have to get a Republican, then they'll take out conservatives, so that their worst case scenario is they end up with a liberal Republican. And I mean quite liberal. You really truly do have, I'm not just calling playground insults here when I call them control freak, neo-communist, thieving liars in the Democratic Party. It's what they are. Every one of those terms is accurate. To the extent that Republicans are not visibly verbally attacking them for the hateful, thieving liars that they are every day on the House floor, calling press conferences, then they're passively going along with it, and in my book, approving. At any rate, that's the power they have. If you've got a local broadcast, one of these stories, a local station will play it 1, 2, 3 times. If it's in Baltimore, Denver, Miami, wherever it is, and then it dies there in that town. Nobody in Seattle or Portland or Norfolk, Virginia, or San Diego hears about it. But when it's national, those all start in a small town. But the networks come in. Katie Couric and Brian Williams and Scott Pelley and Charlie Gibson and the rest of them, they fly teams down there so that the next day, when they're driving something home, the next day at the water fountain at work, that's what people are talking about. That's what people on talk radio, conservative talk radio, are talking about, because you're inundated with it. It's like being in a hailstorm when there's some story that they're just bam, 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 and talk radio is quickly grinding the gears to get the truth behind it, the background, what's going on, so that they know, like pretty significant bloody bruised back of his head on George Zimmerman, that the networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, were covering up. So if you're a talk radio listener or Fox News, you're hearing the next day what the liars are saying, but you're also hearing something that their audiences never get told. And that's the background, the other stories, the angles that they don't want people to know. The power that they have not only extends toward their 50 million plus that they reach per day, but also they will hit that story again the next day, in addition to the 24 times a day on radio. And they will hit it another day after that, then another day, and sometimes for up to 3 weeks. So that, let's say they were able to dig up 4 stories, and it mostly comes every 4 years before a presidential election. They really go crazy toward finding some white racist to get out the black vote. But if they stay on one of these stories, let's say a month each, that's fairly common to stay on Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown for a month. Now, if they find 4 of them, now you've got 4 months, 4, 8, 12, that's 1/3 of the year of people being reminded. White people being turned, some of them turn against themselves, made to feel guilty for being white. We had the movie Roots. We have the whole Civil War thing. Well, actually, the Civil War isn't so much talked about because they don't want anybody to realize that white people died setting slaves free. Republican white people died setting slaves free. And afterward, the Democrats, you'll never hear this in college or by ABC, NBC, and CBS, Democrats founded the KKK. You'll never hear this other part either. White Republicans were lynched. It gets better. All the way into the 60s, you still had Democrats in control and imposing segregation in the 60s. 50s, if you want to go back to Eisenhower, a white Republican president is the one who broke down the walls of segregation.
From the President's office in the White House in Washington, D.C., we present a special address by the President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Mr. Eisenhower discusses the integration problem at Little Rock, Arkansas. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. For a few minutes this evening, I should like to speak to you about the serious situation that has arisen in Little Rock. In that city, under the leadership of demagogic extremists, disorderly mobs have deliberately prevented the carrying out of proper orders from a federal court. Local authorities have not eliminated that violent opposition. And under the law, I yesterday issued a proclamation calling upon the mob to disperse. This morning, the mob again gathered in front of the Central High School of Little Rock. The President's responsibility is inescapable. In accordance with that responsibility, I have today issued an executive order directing the use of troops under federal authority to aid in the execution of federal law at Little Rock, Arkansas.
You don't get any of that because the template, the idea of what you're supposed to get and what most people are getting is that Whitey is racist, Whitey is bad, and That's the way it is, which is not true. I'm not sure it ever was. It wasn't when I was a kid and got chased down the street by blacks saying, I'm going to catch me one of them white boys. When I was tormented in school as a 14-year-old by blacks for my race. Now we're talking the 60s there. So black racism has been pretty common and in my personal life for 50, going on 50 years now. But these people are so good that they've taught an entire population to think whites are more racist than blacks. On top of that, they've excused black racism. We're not dealing with liberal bias here among these people. It's common to hear conservative talk radio hosts say that, but it is not liberal bias. It is outright hateful, manipulative, demonic deceit.
I've got to be careful here, but let's say that might fit with running robocalls with Donald Trump. You're having Sununu as your chief surrogate. There's been a bad side to the Romney campaign. He can go out there and talk sweetly about bipartisanship. But behind the curtains, when no one's looking, of course, he's Donald Trump's best friend. He's putting people out there like Sununu out there to talk the dirty talk, the ethnic stuff. We grew up with it. We thought we got past it. It's there.
It's a shame that that is part of the closing argument that Romney is making in the last few hours of this campaign.
How do you do it when, a lot of folks feel that the GOP has always sort of been like a slightly racist party?
First, the National Urban League took after Rick Santorum. Now, the NAACP. Their charge that the Republican presidential candidate was insensitive and offensive in an Iowa speech last week in which he singled out black people while saying the best way to fight poverty is to help people find jobs, not give them taxpayers' money.
Let me put your unpopularity in context for you. You're a Republican and you're polling behind a black guy.
Certain policies for the right reasons.
Do you think your Republican colleagues are racist?
Not all of them.
Culture war came roaring back today with a pair of hot-button issues, abortion and race. The latest sparks were set off by former Republican Senator Rick Santorum. He's a possible 2012 presidential contender.
From the beginning of paying attention to politics, Ronald Reagan would talk about the welfare queen who was African American. He'd talk about the young buck waiting in line. Yes, he did. He talked about the welfare queen out in Chicago.
Who was African American?
Yeah.
I don't believe he ever used the term.
No, he didn't say it. Didn't have to. Didn't have to.
Teaching entire populations what to think, and to think evil thoughts that are leading to getting people killed. Yes, I'm saying that. I'm saying that the people at ABC News, NBC and CBS, at NPR, the Washington Post, the New York Times, MTV, Comedy Central, USA Today, and others, with their constant injecting resentment into the black population based on distorting history, based on lying about history, they are getting people killed. And they have been for a long time. There's never a black racist on national television, a story about one. Never a story about white people being murdered, raped, tortured, beaten, mocked. It happens a lot. I know it personally. And now, thanks to YouTube, thanks to Fox News, thanks to the internet in general, thanks to Drudge Report, we all get to see it and accumulate them. We get to be a network now, a network of truth. Whereas if somebody reports an incident that he saw in Boston, New York's never going to send that out to the 500 large cities in America, but the internet will. So people who are willing to pay attention, they actually get to know what is going on in this country. They know that there's an epidemic of violent black racism, as exemplified by the knockout game that used to be called polar bear hunting. Get it? Polar bear white. You actually have a game where teenage blacks go out and try to put somebody in the hospital with one punch, a white person, an innocent white person, sneaking up from behind You can't get that reported. They won't report it nationwide. So if you're not a talk radio listener, if you're not somebody who will turn into conservative outlets of information, then really you have no clue what the hell's going on in this country. If you're gullible enough to be talked into thinking, oh, they're all angry, it's just hate on talk radio, so you avoid them and you avoid every other outlet of conservative information, well, good for you. Maybe you're in a good mood and you never talk to an angry, ever hear from an angry person, but you don't know what the hell is going on in your country. You have no way of knowing if you don't tune into places that report the truth. So, back to why I think these people, why I am willing to call them liberal, atheist, professional liars, and occasionally inject the word evil. These are the people, these very nice faces on morning television, ABC, NBC, and CBS, Good Morning America Today, and CBS whatever it's called, evening news, and then also 60 Minutes, Dateline, Nightline, 2020, all of those. Very nice, very convincing, very compelling, very intelligent people. These are the ones that went after the Boy Scouts, because you shall not. And they even lied to go after the Boy Scouts. The idea was that the Boy Scouts were rejecting poor kids who were homosexual. That's not what the Boy Scouts were doing. The Boy Scouts were rejecting leaders who are homosexual, and you should. This is pretty simple stuff, but you'll never hear it made by Scott Pelley or any of them, that you would not put a male as a Girl Scout leader, because males are attracted to females. For that reason, you do not put a homosexual in charge of a Boy Scout troop, because he is attracted to males. These are the people who approve of and barely report about the fact that your daughter, as an 11 or 12-year-old or 13, can be taken out for an abortion, not only without your approval, but without even your knowledge. That's who we're talking about here, these liberals. They'll blame racism on somebody else while hushing up murders and racism, as if racism mattered to them, and it doesn't. They will blame somebody for going to war without proof, then go over and justify a war for somebody else, or hush up one that's going on that does not meet the template. The important thing to take away from this, aside from the fact that it's the huge difference between local news operations and the network news out of New York, is that these folks, the ones at the top in New York, the network people, they work day and night to turn the population, to turn your own children against you. And they do it subtly. You don't even have to believe me. Go to Media Research Center. Listen to Michael Savage, to Glenn Beck, to Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, to Mark Levin, to some of the Fox News segments. These are professionals. Whether you like if their voice is a little too loud, or you've been convinced to think they're angry or not, they have teams, professional teams that put together information packages, showing both sides, showing what a Democrat claims, showing what a newscaster said, and then bringing in experts from those fields to give you the other side of it. They can fill you. Spend 2-3 weeks listening to them, especially Media Research Center, which you can do on your own. Go to the Drudge Report to read the headlines of how things are compared to how you get it in the fake news operations. Convince yourself. Watch these videos I'm telling you about. Learn about evolution. Learn about global warming. Or don't. But don't pretend that you care. It's fine with me. If you want to sit around and just swim and watch comedies all of your life, I just don't think it's fair for you to claim that you really care about freedom, or that you are a person that would stand up for truth. Speaking of which, should I go into this now? Let me think about it. I don't think conservatives and Christians should be sending their sons and daughters into the armed forces of America anymore. We sit back and let them conquer the country, let them bring witches and homosexuals, women into battle in the military. most never bothered to study any of the wars, like the one I just explained about Serbia, to find out if we were even fighting on the right side. And then we call our kids heroes because they joined the military. I think it's time to pull out. We lost this country. It's silly to go on as if, you know, this is all fun and we can just have our little conservative thoughts over here while the whole country's being run by liberals, atheists, liars. But, you know, we hold up our integrity because we believe. We didn't fight. We didn't fight in our country to preserve our way of life, to maintain a truthful, rigid military. I don't see how we've got any business joining. We already gave it up. Why not just give it to them now? Let the liberals have it. Start fighting somewhere else. Fight in your own country. That's where the war is anyway. You don't need a uniform for that one. Time to stop impressing silly girls looking for husbands with this uniform idea when it no longer means anything. Okay, so I got that one in. Bottom line, because it's a teeny bit complicated, I'm making the case that the news operations in America will not report black racism, yet I'm showing you instances of black racism being reported. The distinction being, as I have said, local versus national. 30,000 audience versus 50 million audience. 1 or 2 days reported versus 3 weeks reported, plus 24 times a day on radio. And all in unison, too. One person reports a local station down in Miami. That's not in unison with USA Today, with the Boston Globe, with the Seattle Times, with NPR. So you're not getting hit with it everywhere. Does not sink in. Adolf Hitler taught about this in Mein Kampf. If you want to get a nation thinking a certain way, pound it in over and over from different sides. And that's how it works. ABC, NBC, CBS, Chicago Tribune, New York Times, Washington Post, Boston Globe, San Francisco Chronicle, PBS, MTV, Comedy Central, David Letterman, over and over, everywhere you turn, and the liberals completely taken over by the colleges, completely taken over by liberals. Everywhere you turn, if you're a kid or an adult, unless you go to conservative talk radio, but even if you listen to conservative talk radio, most of the places you're turning, you're hearing a parallel message. So that's very important to note. If one of these things gets reported over here, it's a dot, a blip on the screen, an ocean of lies. And most people have no idea what to make of that blip. And first of all, most people never hear about the blip. But the ones that do, it's never connected with other dots. So, because they're just in that one city. And it isn't pounded home for 3 weeks. In unison, in the school, on radio, on the entertainment, in the movies.
Tonight, the congregation's faith is being tested after the arrest of an 18-year-old man accused of beating and sexually assaulting one of the nuns who lives near the church. Police arrested this man, Andrew Bullock, after the elderly woman was attacked in a parking lot behind the church.
The JBLM soldier was stabbed over and over after being harassed for being white.
Racist attacks by blacks on whites that are thoroughly ignored. Completely destroyed our culture, our morale, our way of life by that, by the deceit, by the immigration, and then the theft through the taxes. You stop them from taking away your guns? Unlikely, because we have no community. They tore down the militias. They turned people against the militias, probably turned militia members against each other. because propaganda is that effective. It works. When you convince somebody that the Tea Party's racist, that militia people are stupid, a segment of the population, I watch them in Christian forums, they're supposedly conservative and Bible-believing, and they turn against Sarah Palin, against the militia, against the Tea Party. I watch them, their own words, they turn against them, the propaganda works. So what will you have left? Nobody will stand up for you, and you will be alone, and maybe you'll get shot in your house, or you'll say, oh, nobody's helping me, I might as well give them my guns. But the point is, they don't need your guns, they got your mind. And that's us in the conservative community. It's time somebody starts blaming us. We are, sort of, I mean, to the extent that a human can be the good side, we are the good side compared to absolute liars and people who sit around paying Democrats to go steal from the population so they can have their favorite welfare programs, or feel like Democrats are taking care of women, taking care of the poor, taking care of the elderly, which was always done before the government took over charity. Read the Tragedy of American Compassion to find out how charity was much better then and accountable. This isn't charity, what's going on now. It's giving heroin to the masses, addicting them to it, and then using them as a voting bloc. But it also simultaneously takes away charity from the people, taking away a purpose, and it also destroys the morale of the country. The lack of accountability creates cities filled with hateful little fatherless and injected with racism minorities, and in some cases, you know, resentful little whites turned against the rich by the media and by the liberal school teachers. At any rate, nobody's teaching this message. I believe firmly in my heart it's time for us to look at ourselves. We have to, and I don't mean get out the guns now and fight with them. I mean get out the paper, get out the computer, get out the protest signs. It stuns me after decisions where the Supreme Court or the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals takes away the rights of American citizens, or in Portland, Oregon, also in Colorado, where people refused to cater to homosexual weddings, and courts went against those people, completely denying religious freedom to them, that there's nobody out there protesting the next day. That John Boehner and Mitch McConnell, and even if it really comes down to it, Marco Rubio's too liberal for me. Of course, Bob Dole, who retired, but he's a flake. And let's see, who else has there been? Well, John McCain, Lindsey Graham. Nobody protesting. When these pigs side with the Democrats, and when they actually come out against conservatives, nobody protesting them. When the Republican leadership just knifed everybody, nobody protesting outside their homes. We're not a community. We have no gathering place. I'd like to start one. I'm thinking of starting one. Protest.com or something. Protest action, protest meeting, gathering place, so that we can come together and have a place where the men and the women of America can, of like mind, get together and find out what each other is doing and begin the process of fighting back. Nobody's teaching that. Sean Hannity sort of takes pride in the fact that he never calls for a boycott. Why the hell not? Where are we fighting? Is listening to Sean Hannity fighting? It helps to get informed, so when you get in an argument with a liberal who really is very hard, they're so firmly entrenched in their mindset anyway that I don't know if this does any good. But you're getting informed, that's helpful, it's good to know it isn't fighting back. It isn't fighting back to sit passively and listen, and then maybe occasionally online argue with the liberals. Boycotting is a form of fighting back that we are not utilizing. It's not the only one I would utilize, but I certainly would not take pride in claiming that I never call for boycotts. Hell yes, call for them. Let's get on these people, these businesses that are taking away Christmas, that are forcing speech codes at work, in effect acting like somebody's mom and dad when all you're trying to do is have a job and get a paycheck, forcing them to tell you how to talk. Nobody's protesting outside the schools. Worse, the conservatives and Christians are putting their kids in those schools. And then the pastors, and this is a really kind of a sore spot for me. I went to church for decades. Well, did I go for decades? I became a Christian 30 years ago, a little more than that. I went to church for a long time, well over 10, 15 years, and then I just got bored to death with it because it was the same thing over and over again. On top of that, I worked nights a lot of that time, so I would listen to Bible studies during the day on the radio a lot. And combine those two, and I reached a point where I was hearing the same thing over and over again. And the same thing was Bible 101, 2, and 3 stories. Bible 101, 2, and 3. Stuff you should hear the first day of the first week of church. Not taught properly to begin with. You're not teaching the congregants to become truth warriors, to defend truth, to become informed. I really think the enemies, the elite media and Democrats and others should be pinned up on the walls in the sanctuary. It should be like boot camp or like advanced flight training, where you're showing the enemy fighters, explaining their tactics. Sure, of course, teach the Bible, but teach it while teaching what the enemy looks like personified today. I mean, the enemy's all obviously, you know, the nebulous Satan, but you can see evil working through people, and thanks to TV and photographs, audio and videotape, we now have names and faces that can be captured and shared with others of who is the personification of evil in our world today. Why wouldn't you, if you're a church leader, teach your congregants that, so that they can teach your children, or you can teach their children? Why would you just keep on going over and over again with the same old Bible stories? Hosea, Elijah, Elisha, you know, John, and the Revelation, and Jacob, and wrestling, and the rib, and over and over and over again in a form of counseling. You know, I'll teach you this, and then you'll become better, you'll feel it in your heart, and you'll change. Okay, that's all good. It's nice to change and to understand what the ideal is, but we're alive too. We're on this planet, and we're not in a dictatorship completely. I would call it a kind of a Plato's Republic oligarchy, but ostensibly we have rights. You might lose your job, but you won't get shot for speaking up for the truth. We're in a country where citizens are called to become intellectually armed and to resist, to fight tyranny, but we're not doing it. And churches definitely aren't teaching it. Jesus walked into the temple and overturned the tables. Elijah went against the king. John the Baptist got his head cut off for speaking against the king. Those people that our churches are teaching about were fighting, but we don't. And we don't teach people to fight. Moreover, we don't teach them what the enemy looks like, who to fight. So nobody's giving us the information needed. Not conservative talk radio, not Fox News, not the churches. But we should be fighting. Really, I mean, or we don't have to fight. I mean, it's all temporal, right? Anyway, you're going to die in 50 years, but you're here, you're alive, you're in the flesh, you're a Christian, you maybe, or at least a conservative. If you're a conservative, you subscribe to defending freedom. If you're a Christian, you subscribe to defending truth. And there's a lot of blending between those two. Liberals tend to not be active churchgoers, and conservatives tend to be churchgoers, and Christians tend to be conservative. There's the blending. You're here. You've got the role models from 2,000 years ago. If you want to go back to Elijah 3,000 years ago, you've got the role models in the Bible. Nobody's teaching it. Not the churches, not the 50,000 churches in America, not conservative talk radio. It isn't being taught. For us to shoulder some of the blame. We deserve some of the blame for watching the culture fall down ahead around us, being informed, hearing it, reported, spoon-fed to us by Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, the rest of them, handing it to us day after day, hearing about, reported of the evil, and getting sound clips of them lying, Democrats lying, Brian Williams, Dan Rather.
Coming up, the reporter whose stories are known for being critical of President Obama, why she's resigning from CBS.
Cheryl formerly worked at CNN and CBS as an investigative reporter. In this exclusive interview, Cheryl discusses why she left CBS and gives us her take on the state of today's news media.
At my heart, I feel like I'm an investigative reporter, and that's what I can bring to the table and contribute. And quite frankly, in the last couple of years, there just wasn't the appetite for that kind of reporting.
Straight from the horse's mouth, Jonathan Gruber telling you that the architects of Obamacare think that you're stupid. And most importantly, they are absolutely counting on your lack of economic understanding. They aren't the only villains in this story, though. They are also depending on the liberal media to help them cover up the truth. So far, NBC, ABC, LA Times, and the Associated Press, and others have been only too happy to comply. Those outlets have not even mentioned the video evidence from Jonathan Gruber. It is shocking.
I was on the Fox Business Network on Friday with Melissa Francis when she suddenly made some news about her former employer. And joining me now from New York is the host of Money with Melissa Francis. So 4 years ago, you're on the set of CNBC when you were anchor. What did you say about Obamacare, and what was management's reaction?
You know, it was at the time that the president and his surrogates were out arguing for the passage of Obamacare, and they kept saying again and again that it wasn't going to cost a dime, that you could add all these people to the system and it wouldn't cost anything. And I was questioning repeatedly, you know, I'm a trained economist, and I was asking repeatedly of our guests, how is that possible? You know, if you add millions of people to the system, it's going to cost something. Right. And after my show one day, I was called upstairs to our manager's office and told that, you know, my comments were inappropriate. And I said, look, this is math, not politics. I'm talking about the dollars and cents. You know, we're a money channel. And I was told that I was, quote, disrespecting the office of the president by questioning the math of Obamacare. And when I did that, I was silenced. I said on the air that you couldn't add millions of people to the system and force insurance companies to cover their pre-existing conditions without raising the price on everyone else. I pointed out that it couldn't possibly be true that if you like your plan, you can keep it. That was a lie. And in fact, millions of people had their insurance canceled. This Fox Business is the only network, and Fox News not complicit in the campaign to keep you in the dark. Don't trust the other guys. I can tell you firsthand, they are willing participants in the campaign to keep the economic truth from you. Don't let them do it.
Your former bosses at NPR, this is the specific grounds for your dismissal, said the problem was that you're a news analyst. You're supposed to provide analysis based on fact, and in fact, they say, you provided opinion. I want to show, though, before I get your answer, what some of your colleagues at NPR have said over the years. In March, Cokie Roberts wrote a column about Glenn Beck in which she said this: Beck is worse than a clown. He's more like a terrorist who believes he has discovered the one true faith and condemns everyone else as a heretic. And that makes him something else as well, a traitor to the American values he professes so loudly to defend. That's Cokie Roberts in a column. And then there's Cokie's reaction on This Week, the show, ABC show, to a Supreme Court ruling on partial birth abortion. Let's watch.
I'm just saying that, you know, women would be protected from regrets later in life. You know, there are lots of moral decisions people make all through their lives where they regret them. And the idea that the court is going to stop that for women is something that I think is just offensive.
somehow NPR didn't seem to think those opinions were objectionable.
Well, you know what, I think, just to be blunt, I think that they were using a lot of this as a pretext to get rid of me. I think they don't like the idea that I appear on Fox News. I think they think that somehow, in their own state of mind, I am somehow legitimizing Fox News by simply appearing on shows rather than being willing to engage in debate and discussion. I think that is in the great American tradition.
Britt, we also have the case of Nina Totenberg, who's not an analyst, but NPR's legal affairs correspondent. Besides, a few years ago, wishing that the late Senator Jesse Helms would get AIDS for opposing
his grandchildren
or his grandchild for opposing AIDS government research. Right. We also have, just in the last month, her reaction. Remember, she covers the court to the court's ruling in Citizens United, a decision that said the corporations could get more involved in political campaigns. Let's watch.
Well, you know, really, this is the next scandal. It's the scandal in the making. They don't have to disclose anything, and eventually, this is the kind of thing that led to Watergate.
And again, this is a reporter who covers the court. So what's going on here?
This is a reporter, and that was an opinion. Now, this is what has been so howlingly clear about this case right from the get-go. That was the statement by Vivian Schiller, the CEO of NPR, the day after this happened, when she sought to explain it and said that they had a very clear editorial standard at NPR that its analysts, and presumably even more so its correspondents, were not permitted to express opinions. Fact-based analysis, fine, not opinions. Juan has expressed opinions over the years here on Fox. It's always sat badly. There's no evidence that Nina Totenberg has ever been in any way criticized, warned, or has suffered any loss of standing for her free-willing opinion dispensing that she's done on that show Inside Washington for almost the better part of 2 decades. In the culture of NPR, appearing on Fox is a sin. And in the culture of NPR, for an African-American man like Juan, regardless of his extraordinary stature, to be there and be kind of a Bill Cosby liberal, not a down-the-line liberal, is a sin as well. They've been gunning for him for years. This remark about Muslim people in Muslim garbs at airports was merely a pretext, and they've been wanting to get him, and they got him, and in so doing, exposed themselves for what they are.
SNL slams Sarah Palin again, but ignores Joe Biden's gaffe. CNN admits to treating Palin differently, but edits out that footage, never even airs it. And even Dan Rather, a big liberal, says that the bias is out of control. Is there any doubt that the left and the mainstream media is pulling for Barack Obama?
We get the clips. We get to play them over again of them lying, caught lying over Trayvon Martin.
This guy looks like he's up to no good. He looks black.
Well, that was the soundbite that NBC ran, an edited version of the 911 call made by George Zimmerman the night Trayvon Martin was killed. Here is the actual call as it played out.
This guy looks like he's up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. It's raining and he's just walking around looking about.
Okay, and this guy, is he white, black, or Hispanic?
He looks black.
Big difference. So big that NBC launched an internal investigation, but only after airing it. They did apologize for airing it on the Today Show and other places, but only after critics slammed their coverage. Judy, you have spent most of your career in print, but what do you say about that kind of selective editing?
Well, you say that you need more than the apology that NBC gave after Fox News broke that story, by the way, of actually comparing these two excerpts.
We must put the words internal investigation in the appropriate sneer quotes here, because it's obvious that they don't really interested in investigating anything. There's no mystery as to how this happened. The guy, whoever it was, did it on purpose. You don't take snippets out of the middle of a quote by accident. That's incredibly intentional. And as Brent Bozell pointed out, not only do they owe a full apology to Mr. Zimmerman, they should do it on television, just like they did the accusation.
Yeah, because it was a print statement, apparently, where this apology came out.
And remember, NBC made the original outrage, and then the New York Times repeated the outrage. And then when Fox News blew this wide open, MSNBC ran the original cut, ran the original tape without actually acknowledging the error.
Caught lying over Michael Brown. We get that. So we're informed and we know that we're being lied to day in and out. We have Media Research Center for those that have figured out enough to go over there, which is an extremely popular and amazingly effective website tracking the daily lies from the atheist elite that own ABC News, NBC, and CBS. We know the stuff, but we're just like maybe still waiting for some miracle. Okay, I'm on your side, you're on my side. We, I guess, have to start pushing ourselves up. And then maybe we'll push the Republicans. Then maybe we'll push Rush Limbaugh. And we'll push the church leaders to say, you know, God gave us this lifetime. We have children. We're supposed to be protecting wives, widows across the street. You can't repair a widow's fence and then let her country be invaded and pat yourself on the back for saying that, like the Bible says, you're taking care of widows. You're not taking care of that widow. You're fixing a fence and feeling good about yourself, probably, about it. It is time for somebody on our side. Let me just look at this list. Yeah, that's it. I covered every area. It is time for really a lot of people on our side to get off our asses, you know? Protest signs, meetings, get together, find other people like-minded. Get 2 of you, 1 of you. If you can only find yourself to do it. Now, here where I'm living, on the streets, they allow people to ask for money out in the median, in the middle of the street. Cars going this way and this way by. And the cops just drive by hour after hour and let them stand there. Well, I'm thinking, why can't I sit out there with a sign telling people, informing people that who the hateful, thieving liars are in politics right now. I mean, yes, we have a lot of liberal weenies in the Republican Party, but the source of hateful, thieving neo-communism, neo-Marxism, whatever you want to call it, is the Democratic Party. You can teach people about the bad Republicans later. You got to start somewhere, you know, day one education. Why not stand out there with a sign? Then if you can get 2 of you, 5 of you, 10 of you out in front of the schools, don't yell. Don't let the media liars show up and capture you being angry. You got a right to be angry, so you don't have to deny your anger or be embarrassed about it. But don't get caught looking stupid about it. Be intelligent. In fact, don't even go out there at all until you're informed, until you can defend things, until you understand why evolution is a scientific hoax, why global warming is a scientific hoax. Watch the Great Global Warming Swindle. Watch Darwin's Dilemma and 100 Scientific Reasons Why Evolution is Stupid. All of these are videos. You can watch these. Watch Century of the Self. You can see how the brainwashing took effect in America. Become informed. You already got a lot of it from talk radio and Fox News and other places. Become informed about the sciences, so when you're marching out in front of the school to say that the schools are lying to children, you know what you're talking about. You're not going to get caught on camera acting like an idiot. But that's the next step for us, to become basically to college ourselves. We can get our own degrees in truthful history and science, so that we're like professors, street professors, and we can explain to students and explain to newsmen if they show up, the little creeps, why you're out there protesting. Not looking like an idiot, but looking like an informed, caring person. And also, prepare yourself for the fact that they're gonna lie about you. Be able to handle that internally. Understand. Don't get mad every time somebody lies about you. That's expected. You deal with yourself. Train yourself how to be a warrior of truth. All of us. Train ourselves. I'm still working in areas on it. And I don't know. I mean, does it matter? Do we want to take back the country? I don't know that I necessarily want to. I'm getting older. Do I care? Yeah, I sort of care. Mostly it's just seems like it's the right thing to do. Defending truth. It's something to do. You know, the boats thing, the on the weekends, the playing with the kids in the yard, the church every Sunday and Wednesday night. It's just all fluff if truth isn't going on in the church. If you're not defending your country, if you're living in this fantasy the whole time, then those things lose their allure. I'm telling you, you think you have rebellious children. Some of you do. You want to stop your children from being rebellious? Give them a real purpose. Give them a real one. Teach them the truth about the fact that their nation is at war and that it's a deceitful war operated through cunning and brainwashing, that it captures the minds of children and adults alike. and show them how to defend truth in public, gather some neighbors and do it, and I'll bet you that we would see a nation full of Christian children who lost their desire to be rebellious in that way, to start acting like little creeps and branching out, because they would be living with a purpose. We haven't been giving children a purpose. For my entire lifetime, we have not been giving children a purpose in this country. But there is one. There always has been one, and we've lacked the leader. Rush Limbaugh's a leader. Sean Hannity is a leader. Some people on Fox News, they are leaders. Bill O'Reilly is to that extent. But they don't want the leadership role. So we have to, they're more like teachers that have the capacity to lead, but they don't want to take that step. So what we, I guess, need to do at this point, not waiting for them to organize it, we need to find islands of leaders in neighborhoods to rise up, like the Tea Party did, but it doesn't even have to be that big, anywhere near that big, and it certainly can't be handed over to some group that takes over and demands everybody act a certain way. It doesn't even have to have a name, but it does need to point out who the enemy is. So to that end, it would be obviously identifiable. It just seems to me like the next step. It's already way late to save the country, but it is not too late to start to apologize to our children, for one thing, for not protecting them, for not becoming informed enough to know why they were, how they were being lied to, for letting them join the military and think of themselves as heroes when we haven't investigated the wars, and the Democratic Party and the liberal Republicans to understand that we're not sending men and women into heroic wars these days. We'd apologize to our children for that. Confront the professional liars, conceivably get some of them fired, maybe entire operations handed over, investigated. I don't know, it just, to me, it seems like a more fun way to live. Defending truth, fighting for freedom, fighting against liars, giving people a purpose, teaching children that there's something more important than growing up and being asked all the time, what are you going to be? What are you going to be? And then they get their marriage and they get their 2-3 bedroom, 2-story house and all happy and saved for retirement, but with no purpose except the Sunday meetings in church, which aren't even fellowship. It isn't fellowship to be, I'm here and you're sitting there and you're sitting there and we don't talk hardly at all. We're an audience and we show up each week. We don't even sit next to the same people each week, and we listen to the same guy and the same singers every Sunday for 30, 40, 50 years. That's not fellowship. And I don't see it as purpose then. It's somewhat teaching, but but I don't think the Bible's being taught right in church anyway. Good men, good pastors in church, I believe that, and I don't want to take it away from them, but I believe the problem is they weren't taught properly. They weren't taught to fight, intellectually fight for truth. They were just taught to here's this happy existence. Somehow it worked. The brainwashing, you'll learn about it in the documentary Century of the Self. Cannot even buy it. You just have to find a copy out there somewhere. But most of the time you can find it on YouTube.
Bernays was the first person to take Freud's ideas about human beings and use them to manipulate the masses. He showed American corporations for the first time how they could make people want things they didn't need by linking mass-produced goods to their unconscious desires. Out of this would come a new political idea of how to control the masses. By satisfying people's inner selfish desires, one made them happy and thus docile. It was the start of the all-consuming self, which has come to dominate our world today.
See how they did it to us. How that it was intentional. If they didn't do it that way, it would have been done some other way through Satan. And I didn't live 500 years ago, 200 years ago. It seems to me people were living in pretty dumb, brainwashed ways back then too. Sheep following after, being taught in childhood how to live, and that way to live not always being right. Being a whole lot better than the way our country in general is living now, to be sure, but really a far distance from the mark that we could, as weak and sinning humans, be living. So humans have been in trouble for a long time, but thankfully now we have tools that we've never had before. The internet, videotape, audio tape, massive means of educating ourselves and educating each other. All right, well, anyway, I don't want to be too harsh on people and scare them away, you know, right away, because a loving person should approach a new idea, even if it's to tell people that they're doing something wrong, should approach it in a thoughtful and patient and decent manner. If this is the first time you've ever heard anybody say the Christians and the conservatives should get off their asses, then I want it to be, on that first occasion, one that's presented in an intelligent and rational way, with expanding on the idea of why it needs to be done and illustrating how it hasn't been done. So there you have it. If you want to have a purpose, if you don't, then, you know, just listen and know where we're messing up, where we're screwing up. Consider it reporting. I don't have to rally anybody. I can be a reporter. And in that capacity, I'm happy to report on where we are in the year 2000, now 2015. I'm happy to be a reporter, on-the-spot reporter and commentator about who we are as humans in the fallen United States of America, fallen Western civilization, caving to Islam, caving to a cultural elite of atheist humanism. I'm okay just being a reporter. If that's all we're gonna do, it's an interesting time to be alive. I'm okay with it. But it would be fine with me too if I saw people, you know, getting busy. Especially people who think they're protecting their own children. I would like to see them either say, all right, you know, I don't really want to protect my children, it's too much work. Or protect them. Not protect them from a photographer shooting pictures of them. Well, maybe, depending on what the photographer's got in mind. But protect them from deceit factories. You know, if the schools were teaching children the truth, it's a little bit on the edge of insanity to put your kids in schools with strangers at all. And then for 12 years is completely off the board insane. Then 4 more years for college, at least 4 more years. That's insane, as far as I'm concerned. But when it's deceit and distortions of history being taught to them, and it's taking 16 years of it, where the hell have our minds been? What are they teaching us in church that we would do that? We would succumb to that sort of craziness? I don't know. I mean, isn't it a marvel to behold? Just think about it. Wow. We are a culture of people who think of ourselves as free, and we hand our children over to strangers for 16 years. When we know, most people in the conservative community have a fair idea that there's some lies being taught in those schools. But even if it was all truth, 16 years. Fuck, man. I mean, put it together. What takes 16 years to learn when you're there all day? All right. Over now. Water. Don't forget. That's water.